Yo, what's up, rockers? You know, restoring consoles and any other kind of retro computer or whatever it might be, you're bound to run into this. Yellow plastic. Man, this is absolutely nasty. But I'll tell you what, I got some easy ways to fix it up and some that are even relatively fast. So today I'm going to show you my retrobrighting process to turn something nasty looking like this back to the way it should. Alright, so kind of kicking things off here, it's probably worth noting a couple things. First of all, for me personally, I live in Chicago, and if it's not obvious enough right now, it's winter. Which means the available sunlight that's available to me is honestly very, very limited. I also find sunlight to be a little bit hard to control, which seems pretty obvious. So for me, I believe the best route to go is with a UV box of sorts. And the best part about using a UV box is it gives you a lot of control and gives you the ability to create both consistent and repeatable results, which when you're doing something like retrobright is extremely important. So kind of taking a look at what I've got here, I've got some basic just tin foil. This is the grill type. It's a little bit more heavy duty, which makes it nice. Along with that, I've also got some of this spray adhesive and just this generic clear storage box. And this one's airtight, which is nice, but honestly, it's completely unnecessary. So I'm just kind of working through the process here, getting the adhesive sprayed onto the back of the aluminum, and then fixing it to the bottom of this container. And again, you can use something as simple as a box, but I'm going to go a little bit further with this, so for that specific purpose, a box wouldn't be suitable. But yeah, we're just going to keep going and completely cover this clear storage box in the aluminum foil. And when you're all finished, you should have something that looks at least something similar to this. Now, like I said earlier, I wanted to take this a little bit further than where I had before. So what you're seeing in front of you is a little piece that I custom made, and I will open source it. There'll be links to the files in the description below. But anyway, I'm going to use this as basically a way for me to affix a heating lamp to my retrobright box. And the reason why I want to do this is I want to use a little bit of heat to help expedite the process, or at least that's what I'm thinking how it's going to work. Now, to make a hole in this thing, I'm probably going to do it the worst way possible, which is just using a drill and a utility knife to kind of score along those drilled holes and cut it out. I'm sure there's a better way to do that, so yeah, take advice from someone else other than me. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, hey Rocker, you said you're going to 3D print this thing, and I 3D printed out of PLA, which is, you know, pretty soft, and you're going to put a heat lamp on top of it. Well, you're right. So my theory is we're going to add a little bit of this aluminum foil tape, and this is typically used for like heating and cooling and specifically the ducting therein. And my thought here is we can use this effectively as a heat sink, and what this should allow us to do is dissipate the heat that's being generated by the heat lamp and being applied to this 3D printed part, and effectively siphon some of that heat away so we don't get part deformation. So with that, I'm going to absolutely coat this thing in the aluminum tape because, like I said, I definitely want that heat to get taken away from this thing. Again, this is probably an optional step. It's not something that's absolutely necessary, but like I said, I want the heating element to be available to me because it'll significantly expedite the process. Also, I'm sure someone much smarter than me in the comments will comment exactly, you know, what part you could buy off the shelf that effectively does the same thing. But as long as we're here with this aluminum tape, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the lid of the box as well and allow it to kind of, like I said, dissipate the heat from there as well. Now, obviously, you could do this with the aluminum foil as well, but, you know, I'm sitting here with this tape, and I got to be honest, it's pretty easy to work with, and I don't have to worry about getting glue all over my hands, so here we are. This is what we're going to do. And once this is all finished, you should be in a position where we're pretty much done with building the box. Sans adding the UV LEDs, which honestly is pretty easy because they're on a self-adhesive strip. I'm going to leave links to everything that you're seeing me use here in the description below, including the UV LEDs for this project. Now, I forgot to capture video of the UV LEDs getting installed, but I just wanted to take you around the box so you can kind of see it. I've also attached them to the top of the box on the lid, as you can kind of see here, and it's all connected via that wire. Not 100% sure it's necessary, but, you know, it's there. The other thing I did is drilled a hole in the side, kind of on the bottom here, And you can see I'm routing out the power for the UV LEDs as well as the sensor for the thermometer. Now you can kind of see how all this is coming together. We've got the lid. On top of the lid is going to be the 3D printed part that we just covered in the aluminum foil. And finally on top of that is going to go the heat lamp. Now the one thing I want to point out is the heat lamp is connected to this temperature controller, and this basically shuts off power to it once it reaches the designated temperature. For me, I set it to about 95 degrees, and you can see how everything kind of just comes together just like that. Alright, with that box finally built, it's time to talk about what we're actually going to use to make our parts white again. And typically what I use is either the Salon Care Cream 40 liquid or cream. Now this stuff is basically a hair developer, so what it does is it's supposed to effectively, bleach your hair, for lack of better words. It's basically a hydrogen peroxide mix, and depending on the method of retrobright that we're going to do, will depend on which one of these you're going to use. We'll get into specifics here momentarily. Okay, first up is this Sega Saturn that you saw earlier in the video, and this thing's pretty nasty. It needs a deep clean as well as some retrobright, and it's probably important to point out that you want to make sure you do a cleaning, a very good cleaning, before you start actually doing any retrobright. This is probably outside of the context and scope of this video, so I'm not going to cover it, but something as simple as giving a nice soapy bath and getting all of any Sharpie or any other marks off is in your best interest, as you want this thing to be really clean before you start retrobrighting it. But taking a look at what we got over here, the first one we're going to cover is a non-heated method. So for this, it's just building the UV box, and the one that this is going into is just a really large cardboard box. And I'm going to use a little bit this really large saran wrap that I've picked up, and we're going to start with the cream method. And it's very simple. All you want to do is apply cream to the console and then use either a chip brush, or in this case I'm using a toothbrush, to really get all that cream into all the nooks and crannies. The one thing I do want to point out that I probably did a pretty awful job of is I'm not wearing gloves. Either nitrile or latex gloves work really well, and I'd highly recommend it. This stuff will stain your skin, so for whatever it's worth, keep that in mind. I'm personally not overly sensitive to it, but if you are, you want to definitely make sure you're wearing gloves. But like I said, we're going to get this spread all over the console, get in all those nooks and crannies, and we're going to do the same thing for the top, bottom, and disk drive. And once everything's applied, we're going to take it over to our UV box and place it in there. Now, typically speaking, this can take anywhere between 12 and, up to 2 or 3 days. It just really depends on how yellowed the console is. And what you're going to want to do is check on it every 8 hours or so, and you're going to want to reapply the cream every 12. And that's just generally how I do it. Obviously, you can check it more or less frequently depending on how much retrobright you need. Now, this is being done in my basement. My basement runs at about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, so as you can imagine, it's fairly cool, so this process does take quite a bit of time. Now, for this console specifically, it took about 2 days to finally get all of the yellow gone and make it look really, really nice. Now, to me, it's totally worth it, and again, I like using the cream method for this exact purpose. You take your time, and you make sure you get it right. The real key with this is just to reapply every 12 or so hours, and make sure you're spreading around the cream to get it into all those nooks and crannies, and make sure you got a really nice coating. If you forget to change out the cream, the downside is you can get the console to marble, which means that certain areas are going to turn out more white than others. But as you can see, I got a great result here. Everything looks fantastic, and this console's had a few other nice mods done to it as well, and it looks fantastic. Alright, with that out of the way, we're going to move over to the liquid method, and I've got this shell here. This is a GameCube rear shell, and it's clear, or I should say was clear at one point, and it's obviously yellowed, as you can see based on the white background behind me. So we're going to use the liquid method for this, and I'm going to give it a nice cleaning off camera. Alright, so I got the shell in the box, and I've got a separate Tupperware container in there, and I'm going to mix up my Salon Care Cream 40 volume with water. Now, I don't actually know the distillation or the hydrogen peroxide content that's in this stuff. I'm not actually sure, but based on some of the experiments I've done, I typically go 1 part of the Salon Cream 40 liquid, and then I mix that with 6 parts water. So in this case, it's going to be 1 cup of that and 6 cups of just plain water. And the one thing that you kind of struggle with this is as you start to add water, and you're going to clearly see it here, the controller shell is obviously less buoyant, and so therefore it will float. So you need to find a way to kind of hold it all down. And the way I've managed to accomplish that is with some of these neodymium magnets. And I got some with a 3D printer a while back that are encased in plastic. So it just happens to work out well where they end up being, effectively waterproof. So I've kind of got those stuck in there, and I'm going to fix the other two that are going to go in the sides of the shell, and that should hold it and allow it to be submerged. Now, the most likely question you're going to ask yourself is, hey, Rocker, what's the point of doing it this way? What's the benefit? Well, to me, the benefit is really twofold. First of all, it is less likely that you're going to experience any streaking or anything like that because everything is submerged underwater. You don't have to worry about spreading around the cream. Now, the other thing that's a huge benefit to this is if you do a heated method like I'm going to do it here, it goes a lot faster. So whereas before it took me, 2 days, this will probably take anywhere between, if I had to guess, 4 to 6 hours to do. The biggest downside to doing it like this is really twofold. It's one, it's going to cost you more money to set all this stuff up and buy the requisite equipment. And two, you're going to go through the liquid a lot faster. Now, having said that, it's cheap enough, so I guess in theory, who cares? So it's been about 4 hours, and I'm pulling this thing out to take a look at it. I did add some saran wrap to increase the heat in the liquid, and it's looking pretty good after about 4 hours. I think another couple hours in here, and this should be done. And after 5 hours of retrobright, everything's looking really good. I'm completely happy with the result on this controller back, and honestly, it went really fast. I hope this video helped you guys and maybe gave you some alternative ways to think about how you can do some retrobright indoors. Both the cream and liquid method work really great, and hopefully this inspired you to go ahead and try some retrobrighting yourself. And if nothing else, hey, next time you run into that yellow plastic, you don't have to worry about it. Now you know how to take care of it. If you enjoyed this video, give me a comment, like, and a subscribe. And if you got any feedback on how you do your retrobrighting process, please share it below. I always love learning new things. But anyway, I'll catch you guys for the next one here soon.